The classic story goes that around 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa and into Europe. There they encountered the Neanderthals, a stocky, strong species of human that had been living in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. It turns out the Neanderthals not only survived longer than previously thought, but may have even outperformed our species in certain areas. So who really won? The short answer is that it depends on what you value. The slightly longer answer is that it's complicated. And after some brief interbreeding, the newcomers quickly outcompeted the natives for resources, drove them to extinction. Recent studies suggest that they were constantly on the move, following herds of reindeer and other large mammals across the landscape. They propose that the increasing dryness of the region favored this way of life because plants and animals were more concentrated near water sources, making them easier to harvest. And given that modern humans eventually spread to every corner of the globe, it seems that both species were able to make use of the resources available to them. In the end, maybe the real winner is whoever got to be the first to put pants on a baboon. Now, where did they put pants on a baboon? And a handful of studies have found that Neanderthals in this part of the world had access to more protein and other nutrients than their Homo Sapiens counterparts. And instead of maintaining permanent settlements, they may have lived in small groups that roamed from place to place. If that's the case, they would have left behind far fewer artifacts than larger, more sedentary groups. So it's possible that we simply haven't found enough physical evidence to understand how they lived in the region during the late Pleistocene epoch, and went on to build the pyramids, invent agriculture, and write really bad Yelp reviews about the food in those days. Well, it turns out that the archaeological record is pretty patchy. You see, archaeologists typically identify sites by accident or when satellite imagery reveals something unusual. Then they painstakingly excavate the site by hand, carefully cleaning and cataloging artifacts, and then painstakingly writing up their findings in academic journals. This process is slow and expensive, and most archaeological sites remain unexcavated. As a result, the absence of evidence isn't necessarily evidence of absence. We just haven't found much physical evidence that points to Neanderthals living in this part of the world around 12,000 years ago, which is not all that long before the end of the Ice Age, and certainly not long enough for them to have written their own version of the Iliad. In other words, Homo sapiens clearly won. The end. Except recent research suggests that it wasn't quite that simple. Our current understanding of the Neanderthal final millennia is based largely on the site of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. Excavations at this site have revealed a series of structures built around 12,000 years ago, just a few thousand years before the generally accepted date for the Neanderthals' extinction. These structures are impressive feats of engineering, but the presence of tools and other artifacts at the site suggests that they were used for something more akin to a workshop or storage space rather than a home. Archaeologists think that the people who built them likely lived in tents or caves nearby, at least seasonally. But the builders aren't the only people who used the site. Flint tools found at Göbekli Tepe show signs of extensive use and wear, suggesting that the site may have also been a hub for butchering animals and making tools, kind of like a prehistoric Airbnb. But if Neanderthals were still around at this time, why don't we see more evidence of their presence at places like Göbekli Tepe? But there's another reason why the archaeological record is failing us. Neanderthals may have been more transient than we think. In fact, some researchers argue that these so-called nomadic hunter-gatherers actually thrived in the area during this time. Now, while we can't say for sure whether Neanderthals were thriving or merely surviving, one thing is clear: they stuck around a lot longer than we used to think.